Hey girl, and welcome to the show specifically made for the girls with your host, Tobi Naomi. Now, if you see me on your For You page, your Instagram feed, even your YouTube shorts, welcome bestie. It's good to see you again. Now, if you haven't, consider me your internet big sister, best friend who thrives on oversharing about her life and all lessons that she's learning along the way. Stick around long enough and we'll become very good friends. This video is for the firstborn daughters, but also the people pleasers, any girls that were ever labeled overly sensitive, defensive. This video is basically for girls like me. And we're about to get a little bit vulnerable, so let's get comfortable because there's a lot to talk about. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm always talking about being a firstborn daughter, like always talking about being a firstborn daughter. Some people hate it, and that's okay, middleborns. We see you, you're seen, it's okay. It's okay. But it's a big part of like who I am. However, it's not the only part of who I am. And one thing that has been like big with me, big in my mind while I've been sharing videos for the girls on Instagram, TikTok, and now here has been the fact that we're not just one type of girl. Like none of us, women, humans in general, but specifically women, are very multifaceted beings. And even just in the list of girls that I listed out, just 4 types, we can all relate with at least one, if not more of them. All these different types of girls exist in each of us. So you can be a people pleaser, but also a corporate girly. You can be a lover girl who's sensitive, but also a confident girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's not just one facet of each of these types of girls to each of us. And so it was really important for me in this video to not limit it to just one type of girl. Like I'm talking to the sensitive girlies that may also be people pleasers. However, if you, knock if you buck, like at the same time, you could be a firstborn daughter that's also you're a quiet girl, you're a shy girl. And that's the beauty of all of us, is that all these different types of girls exist in each of us simultaneous. Little backstory, because I got a comment the other day asking me to share a bit of like my story of like, oh, like how was it being or growing up, sorry, not raising up, as a firstborn daughter. And I had the best time. Like I share my experiences and articulate, like give language to some of the things that like I experienced, not because they were all bad, but because you need language for different things that you experience in life, and also for the other girls too that may not have language for what they experience. But in my case, I had great siblings who I love and adore, and they also adore me, so that helps. And I had parents that, yes, I had some typical firstborn daughter experiences, like being the scapegoat for everything and then watching the rest of your siblings not have to, have certain punishments or whatever because your parents figured out with you that was probably not the best idea. But at the same time, they were fantastic and made sure that like joy and always having a good time and like having fun was a big part of our childhood growing up. Like my memories of my childhood are just filled with a lot of fun. Like in Inside Out 2, when joy, like what are they called? The core memories were was it green or blue? No, blue was sadness, green was joy. A lot of them were filled with green. That's how I feel like my childhood was. So very fun, very great. My parents didn't make me parent my siblings. They handled that. They had that down pat. However, at the same time, like I just gave an example of, there were some things that I was like, oh, I'm noticing that there's a difference between me and, let's say, my younger sister, for example. And I don't think it's because of anything other than the fact that our birth order is different. And so when I speak about being a firstborn, it's not because I think it's the be-all end-all of the world, but it's something that separates us a little bit, wherein middle kids have their own experience. And if you get in a conversation with a middle child, they'll tell you all about it. And lastborns and, fifthborns, if you make it that far, everybody has their own individual experience, but firstborns experience things differently. We were literally the first kids given to our parents who at the time were probably children themselves, let's be honest. And so all of that being said, that's a big reason why I share a lot about firstborn experiences. Now, in that though, back to my childhood, I remember that at a certain point, I don't know when, obviously, but I remember having a conversation with my dad where he was like, you need to understand that people aren't always going to be happy with you, and that's okay. Like, people aren't always going to like you. They may not always love you even, and that's fine. And I think he probably brought that up because he started noticing that I had very big people-pleasing tendencies. And I was probably like 6, 7 at this point, but I would do anything and everything to make sure that people in any given room that I was in liked me. And don't know where it came from. Haven't gone that deep in therapy to figure that out yet. So stay tuned to find out. But I just know that people-pleasing was a very big part of like my life growing up, and that's, yeah, I think it shaped a big part of who I am. And there's a couple things that I wish people told me back then, and I know my dad tried talking to a 6-year-old about feelings and people pleasing, and watch how that goes. Obviously there were some things that like couldn't get through to me at that time, but now one thing that I wish I knew then, if I could have comprehended it, is that people aren't always going to like you, like my dad said, but not just that, it's actually bad if everybody likes you, because then that means you're doing nothing for you. For example, I don't like everyone. And that's no shade to them. That's no shade to, you know, the people that I don't particularly like. We just don't happen to gel, because guess what? Every human is made differently. And so for the people-pleasing girls, that's one thing that if I could, you know, say to anybody would be the fact that like you're never going to be liked by everyone, because everyone is different. So the moment you're actually liked by everyone, first of all, you have no personality. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're actually a shapeshifter, because in order for 100 people, 100 unique people to like the same thing, that thing has to be able to bend to the individuality of each person. Simultaneously, if you're liked by 100 people in a given room or whatever, that means you had to bend to fit the likes and the little quirks and the little things that each person notices in order, you know, to please them all. And at that point, you cease to be you. It's not even possible. And I think that was something that, you know, obviously 6-year-old me, 7-year-old me, whatever, was hard to understand for her. But the older I grew, it's something that I wish I knew before I, you know, did all the things of bending over backwards just for someone else. However, now, I wish, oh, we're not allowed to say that word on here. I wish someone would try, because there's a lot more that I've learned. So that's one thing that I would say to people pleasers, if I could, that you actually can't be liked by everyone, and that's a good thing, because people are all different. But anyways, going deeper into the story, my story, which is actually a lot of our stories, as I'm realizing from sharing on the internet, but at some point, I also noticed that I was a very sensitive girl. And I thought that was a bad thing. For the longest time, I thought that was such a bad thing. I remember at 10, I wrote like a long letter to my parents, and I was so frustrated writing that letter, not at them, at myself, because I felt like I had a lot of feelings that I didn't always have language for. And that came up later in my life. And, you know, once I got the language, I started being labeled defensive, but we'll get into that in a second. But the sensitive part of me, like I was the kid that would be in a room and would notice, oh my gosh, that auntie is really sad. And I didn't always know how to say it, or like I couldn't always put my finger on it, because, you know, when you're young, you don't know things as well as you may feel them. But it was a very big, what's the word I'm looking for? It was a very big like character trait, I guess you could say, that I had. And sometimes the feelings felt like too big for me to hold. But at the same time that I was trying to like figure out how to carry those feelings, I felt like I was also being penalized for it. And I remember seeing a comment on a video that I made about your sensitivity is not a weakness, sorry. And somebody was like, I wish I wish people in my life knew this. And I never got to reply to the comment, but if you're watching this, it's actually okay if they didn't know that, and if they don't know that, because I don't even think everybody in my life, as amazing as they are, is aware of that. But that was a realization that I had to come to for myself, because numerous times I felt like my sensitivity got me in trouble, and not necessarily trouble of like punishment, but you know, little things like, you this girl, like, it's not that serious, or why are you crying again? I'll give you a reason to cry. If you're Nigerian, you've definitely heard that one, because the littlest things would make me cry, or the littlest things would make me upset, or just, you know, evoke a certain type of feeling, insert emotion here. And I guess that maybe I was subconsciously waiting, kind of like the person in my comments said, for everyone in my life to get on the bandwagon that like, this isn't a bad thing, this isn't a weakness, this isn't a negative trait to have. But growing up and coming into more of my person, shout out to God, shout out to therapy too, and like life experiences and being loved through that sensitivity, I realized for myself that it's not a bad thing. First of all, it takes a great level of strength. Let me tell you something. It takes a certain type of human being to be able to have such a level of empathy that you walk into a space and you can feel the feelings of other people and you don't crumble. Like that in itself is a feat. It may not be seen that way by everybody, and you know, not everyone may have that perspective on it, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a lot. And so back to what I was saying, I had to come to that realization on my own, or for myself, maybe not on my own, because I definitely had some help, but for myself, without waiting on other people to realize that. And I guess in the same theme as like what I said to my people-pleasing younger self, if I could go back to tell her something, or one thing I wish that she was told, the part of me that like thought being sensitive was a weakness or a bad thing, it would just be that it takes a lot more strength to be sensitive to people's emotions and sensitive to your emotions, and not crumble, than it does to be jaded. It's actually a lot easier to be jaded by experiences in life that make you not want to feel stuff as deeply so that you don't get hurt, as opposed to allowing yourself to feel it and acknowledge that like, hey, this is how it feels. It may not feel nice right now, or it may feel great. Because sometimes it's also sensitivity to joy, where you're like, oh my God, I'm overstimulated, whichever side you fall on. But it's a lot easier to be jaded than it is to give into those emotions and lean into those feelings. And yeah, I'm just gonna reiterate that your sensitivity is not a weakness. Like, girl, let's not go too deep. Come back for season 2 and we'll have probably a number of guests. One that I could think of right now, that like her whole brand is being known as like somebody that embraces her feelings and publicly. And yeah, you'll come to learn that your sensitivity is actually one of the greatest strengths that you could have. But from there, in my story, I'm trying to keep going back to that story, from the age of 10 or whatever, wherever I was at when I realized, oh, you be feeling stuff. Like you really be feeling stuff. I went into, I think, high school, and you'll see how this story connects. The part that we're about to get into is for the defensive girl, but you'll see how this story connects into there. So I went into high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. This was because I had watched too much Scandal. For the girls that are currently watching Scandal, Suits, How to Get Away with Murder, you don't really want to be a lawyer. You just like Olivia Pope. You just like, what's that babe's name? The one in How to Get Away with Murder. It's okay to like the show and to not say you want to be a lawyer, but I didn't know that back then. So I told myself, you know, and I was also good at speaking and I could defend myself. People say it's defensiveness. I say it's knowing how to argue or how to win an argument. But anyways, that's a joke to the side though. I went into high school and I took legal studies. It was an option that was available because my whole mind was I'm going into university to become a lawyer. Now, legal studies was one of the options available. The other one that was like very new to the school was psychology. And I don't actually remember how how I got into that class, but I just know that like it was something that interested me, and I was like, you know what, sure, we're gonna take this up. But one thing that I do know, even though I didn't know everything about what the class entailed, I was always very into like understanding my feelings. I already told you the part about being overly sensitive, or let's actually stop using that word. The part about being sensitive to my emotions, there's no such thing as being overly sensitive. But so I knew that like that was something that I wanted to understand more of and become more well-versed in. And so I took the class. Little did I know that it was going to open me up to a whole world. And fast forward to university, got in for political science to lead into law school, hated it completely. And sidebar for the indecisive girls, it's okay to change your mind about your career. Actually, this isn't even just for the indecisive girls. For any of the girls, it is okay to not know what you want to do with your life at 17, 18. That's actually unrealistic, and it's most likely going to change. If it doesn't, props to you. You better than us. But if it does, it's also extremely okay, because at 17, 18, I was 17 at the time. Actually, I was 16 when I was applying to university. There was so much, oh my days, so much that I did not know about life in order to like be well equipped or to have all the tools that I needed to make that decision. But nonetheless, that's just a sidebar. It's okay to change your mind. And that's exactly what I did. I changed my mind. I went into, so from political science, I switched to psychology. Now, the reason why this story is important in my development into the phase of life where I wouldn't say I was labeled, because I'll be honest, it's not like everybody was saying it to me, but the word "you're defensive," or like the term defensiveness, came up a lot. The reason why this part of the story is so linked to it is because I told you how when I was younger, I always felt like I was trying to find language, like to give language and expression to the feelings that I was having. And when I was trying to write a letter to my parents, and I was feeling frustrated at the fact that I couldn't figure out what I was trying to, communicate to them. And now fast forward to university, I was in psychology, and like throughout high school, high school doesn't really go too deep into all these things, but university submerged me and gave me so many words to describe. I could describe one feeling to you with 500 different words, and we'd still be on feeling number one. You know what I mean? Like it was serious, and it was a blessing, and I wouldn't say a curse, maybe a curse to the people that were feeling frustrated at me being defensive. And sidebar, once again, you'll get used to my sidebars. It's possible to be defensive. Let's just lay that out here. Defensiveness is not a good thing. However, being able to defend yourself is. And I think that that's definitely something that people get mixed up often, because not a lot of people have language for their experiences. And that was something that I came to realize quite quickly, that there's a lot of us that are walking around with feelings that we can't quite articulate. And that's why when somebody says something that deeply resonates with you, you often hear, "Oh my gosh, you said exactly what I felt." Like that's something, and funny enough, that's something that I hear under my videos a lot of times. And it makes me so happy. And it's a very gratifying feeling, because I know how it felt to not have language for things I was experiencing, and how much better it feels being able to put words to it. So hearing that I'm giving language to someone that may have had a similar experience but not known how to say it, top 10 feelings in the world, hands down, easily. But yeah, so a lot of people are walking around not necessarily knowing why they feel what they feel, or even what they're feeling at the time. And because of that, it can be a little frustrating, some might say triggering, when you encounter somebody that can give language to everything they're feeling. For the most part, obviously never perfect, but is more proficient in giving language to what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they're experiencing internally. it can be a little bit triggering because you're sitting here, and I understand it because I've also encountered people that can give language to their feelings more than me. And I'm like, oh, this isn't a nice feeling, because you're here trying to put words to your, your thoughts, your feelings, whatever. And they're able to explain theirs times 5 before you even get to the first part of yours. And noticing that was very helpful, because I would be hearing, oh, you're being defensive. And I'm sitting down there like, all I did was explain what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't even gone halfway to this conversation. I'm already hearing that word being pulled out. And it took me some time to come to terms with it. Sometimes I was being defensive, and I had to learn that you can't come into a conversation. Let me say this the right way. The difference between defending yourself and being defensive is a very fine, very, very thin line. And it just borders on the point that defending yourself has to do with, I'm communicating to you, to the person, what I'm feeling on the inside, what I'm trying to say, what I'm thinking. Defensiveness is, I'm trying to prove, it's usually used when you're wrong. I'm trying to prove why in this situation I'm not as wrong. Pause. Okay. Where was I? I'm gonna find it. The difference between being defensive and defending yourself and being defensive is a very fine, very thin line, but it borders on being defending yourself has to do with, or being able to come to your own defense, that's a better way of saying it, has to do with communicating what it is that you're feeling as a person that, is an entity different from the person you're talking to, and you're trying to say, these are my points, these are my thoughts. Being defensive is usually when a person is wrong and they're trying to defend that wrong action against the points that the person, their opponent is bringing up against them, and trying to justify what is not right. That's how I understand being defensive. And so there were times where I had to realize and learn and take in the feedback that in this moment you were wrong, and there's no justifying that. That's separate, and it can be hard to take that in, but it's really important to, first of all, know the difference and stop that part of it. However, also realize that it's important to also be able to stand up for you and explain your point of view and communicate your feelings. And I wish that there were a lot more people that had language for what they were experiencing, so that way we're able to, talk together. You say your side, I say my side. Ain't nobody here accusing anybody of being defensive. We're just actually having a conversation. But because there aren't, a lot of times people are going to defer to, this is a defensive moment. However, one thing that I did come to learn, and if I could speak to any girl that's ever being labeled defensive, this is what I would say. The fact that you can give language to your feelings is a great thing. It's a pro. However, you're also going to have to learn how to use it. Let me reword that. In order to be a little bit more palatable when it comes to standing up for you and explaining your POV on things, it actually helps if you're able to also offer language to the person you're having a conversation with, or you're in a disagreement or whatever with, because that way it stops being just about you and just about how you're feeling and, explaining your side of things. And it actually becomes, oh, she has language for her stuff and, for what she's experiencing, but she's also able to offer up language to me. Nobody in a situation like that is ever going to label you defensive, because immediately it goes from a thing about you into, okay, we're both trying to talk this out. If I can find the words, you offered it to me. If you can find the words, I offered it to you. And that way we can all stand up and explain, that's not even the word I'm looking for. We can actually fulfill the point of a conversation, which is getting to know each person's inner thoughts and desires, whatever expectations, depending on the conversation you're having, as opposed to each person just trying to get a word in over each other, because that's not actually a conversation, that is an argument. There's a difference. You know what I mean? So that's just one thing that, like, it was not easy. It wasn't always easy to learn that, or it wasn't always easy to receive that, but I had to grow in that area of, yeah, just that whole defensive label, because it's definitely not a good feeling being called that. However, there's a balance to it. You know what I mean? There's a way to do both. No, not do both. There's just a balance to it. Let's stick with that. We'll go with that. And so that being said, we've said a lot of things, honestly. I don't know what that is. I've talked about the firstborns. I've talked about the people pleasers, the sensitive girls, the defensive girls, but all around, I think just the fact that, like, each of us can relate to at least one thing in this. Let me rephrase that. Pause. I have 2 more minutes for this entire video. How am I gonna fit this dilemma in here too? Okay, I know how I'm gonna end off. With all of that being said, and I don't know what that is, because that was a lot of things that were said, but yeah, I hope you've been able to, like, one of those girls resonates with you, or even one of those points. And if you're not the sensitive girl and you're not the defensive girl, but you're a firstborn daughter that can relate to the experience of growing up with joy, but also growing up in a space where you were like, there's a difference between me and my siblings, and I'm held to a higher responsibility than they are. Yeah, you're not alone, and it's not just you, and there's a lot of us, and there's me, and I'm going to be sharing a lot more on that, and a lot more, like, you know, in that area of things, but you're not alone. And I hope this video makes you feel a little bit less alone and a little bit more seen, because you are. So thank you for hanging out with me. You guys are the best, and I know that you played the game along with me in the comments, didn't you? I know you did, but thank you for hanging out with me. I hope that something I said resonated with you and made you feel a little bit more seen, a little bit more heard, gave you language for your feelings. Leave a comment down below. Tell me where you're watching from right now. And if you enjoyed playing that game with me. And actually, no, I have a better one. Tell me what type of girl resonated with you the most from this video. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to have 7, a lot of wonderful guests that are going to talk about different types of girls that you may resonate with a little bit more. So stick around to find out. Share this video with someone you think will need it or could use it in the future, right now, in their past. Like the video, subscribe for more, all the things that you'd be doing on YouTube. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Bye.